I just want to clarify, your views on this podcast does not represent the views of Just a Pile. Just want to drop that in there.
Yeah. Always good to have that disclaimer in.
Hello, Phoebe, and thank you for finally coming on my podcast.
Hello, Josh. It's been a while coming.
Yeah, we're going to admit today we're both a bit tired. We've had a full day out on the streets. I don't know. How's your day been?
Really great. Today has been the first day of week 13 of our slow marching campaign, which has been going on since April, since 24th of April. And this week is really exciting because we've been managing to keep up doing these marches day after day, week after week, by splitting the country into regions, and then each region takes it in turns travelling down to London for a week of marching. But this week is different and exciting because people from every region around the country have come down to London for a week of massive disruption and marching. So it's been good, but I am exhausted. I've been up since 5 a.m. and I've been called a wanker. And quite tired now.
You know, I'm actually really jealous that I've been unable to go to these slow marches. I wish I could come all week as well to every single day. I think if I was allowed to go to London and protest, I think I'd just move to London permanently and just slow march every single day. So I'm a bit jealous, to be honest.
It's the thing keeping me here, the activism in London. Other than that, who would want to live somewhere dirty and smelly and noisy and crowded and lack of green spaces? There's a great massive park we're sat in.
It's just an endless concrete jungle, basically. Oh God, I'm actually exhausted right now. Today was rough on it. It wasn't that bad actually. We didn't get much violence, but it was definitely long.
Yeah, they're very long days up at 5 a.m. and then this is the first moment we've had a chance to sit down and open a can. It's 4 o'clock, so a very long day.
I guess the obvious question is so you got involved. Sorry, when did you get involved in Just a Pile?
Last August, and I guess I had a slightly not so conventional route to getting involved, because most people go to a talk, they kind of hear the truth about the climate crisis that we're not usually told, and then they hear the social science and what we're going to do about it. I never had that. I signed up online, and I think it was just because something broke in me. And I signed up online and went straight in pretty hardcore. I had 3 arrests in my first week, took on 2 Crown Court cases, and have just been giving it my all ever since.
So, what drove you to do that then?
I think it was because being 21, I've grown up most of my life feeling quite environmentally aware, or hearing about the climate crisis, or rather they would have called it climate change or global warming, and those little nuances in language, and the way we were taught it in school. You know, we're taught about the climate crisis in the most insane ways. In GCSE geography, you're taught the pros and cons of the climate crisis. Cons, crop failure and more heat waves and floods and droughts and storms and worldwide famine and mass displacement of people. Pros, we can grow wine in the UK, and the kids can play outside in February. So of course, all of this just led me to believe it was this far off threat that I wouldn't have to worry about, because the people in charge, the grown-ups, were sorting it all out for me.
Can I tell you what? I was following climate change for a number of years, but I was also seeing the price of solar power falling. So I was looking at a graph solar power's falling, coal staying constant. So that means solar power will pass coal, and capitalism will solve all our problems. Then, well, basically, once green energy becomes cheaper than fossil fuels, the entire economy will just switch. But then, obviously, once that happened, and it turns out that our government subsidises fossil fuels to make them even cheaper, to distort the market and basically, distort the market and make it so fossil fuels keep going because they're more profitable. That was quite a shock to me. For me, it was more I guess I came across the climate crisis, and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, what the actual fuck? Like, this cannot be real. And I actually spent more time researching the science behind it and the IPCC report, and I was like, no, this can't be real. So I carried on researching and carried on going, and the more I read, the more horrified I became. And then I came across Extinction Rebellion, and I did like a bit of a march with them, and didn't really achieve anything. And then I got introduced to Insulate Britain, which is where I thought, you know what, shutting down the M25 continuously might work. So you said you was environmentally aware from a young age. Like, when would you say you became aware of, say, climate tipping points, for example?
Tipping points? One of those words that was thrown about that I didn't really know what it meant. And another one of those things that I thought was being taken care of because it was being spoken about. So calmly, the way that these politicians, full well the future we're heading towards, speak about it. But when I really got clued up on the science, and I started doing my own research, maybe similar to you, around 18 or a bit before, and that's when I went vegan.
How old are you now?
21.
Okay.
Just before 18, when I was 17, just before my 18th birthday, I turned vegan, and that's when I started writing to my MPs and signing petitions and going on traditional marches, because I think I had this sense of, well, I'm just 18, it's not my responsibility to do something about it, and I still didn't have a sense of the urgency, and I looked at Extinction Rebellion, and I really admired people's bravery getting arrested and the sacrifice they were making, putting their civil liberties on the line. But I looked at it and said, I made the excuses that so many of us make for so long. Oh, I'm still doing my A-levels, I shouldn't be the one to get arrested. Oh, but then I want to go to university, because that's what I was always promised to me, that this was, you get your education, then you go to university, and then you get your job, and you can have this future, and you can have your family and your kids. People my age don't get that. But at 18, I was still convinced that...
People are still getting that, by the way. Most people, I say our age, I'm 9 years older than you, but people in our age bracket are still planning to have families and kids and futures and jobs and things, and they're just not really clicking at the fact that how fucked their futures are going to be.
Well, they're trying for it, but they're not going to get that future they were promised. And I'm more grateful now that I've snapped out of this lie, that we're looking at the reality, even though it's a heartbreaking one, because then you can start doing something about it. But most of the people I speak to my age still believe they're going to get that, still believe that they can have their 2 kids and their dream job, and their kids will be fine. I speak to people my age and they say, but it's not going to affect me, it will affect my grandchildren.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I go well, actually, you're wrong about that. So yeah,
it's already affecting us here, just people don't see it.
When people say that to me, well, it won't affect me, I tend to explain that, well, first of all, I explain the methane and the permafrost tipping points and the retreating Arctic ice, and I've explained all these things on the podcast before, so I don't have to go over them again, but basically all the tipping points. And I said to them, do you know what exponential growth means? And for those that don't know, it means you go faster and faster and faster, and before you know it, you're like a rocket going straight up. We're looking at exponential heating of the planet, and then people tend to go quiet after that. They don't have anything to say.
Yeah, it's funny. I invited when I was still at uni, quite a lot of uni friends to a talk, a Just Stop Oil welcome talk. And afterwards, I still got people saying to me, yeah, but Phoebe, I've got an essay due this week. And I was just like, I don't know how you can sit through the same talk that I've just sat through. I was just telling you, all of those dreams that you had for yourself, they don't stand a chance unless you fight for them now. It's so much to take in, and I think particularly for young people, it's there's a lot more grief to come. There's a lot of grief happening around the world that we don't see in the UK, because we're economically developed and because we won't see the worst effects of the climate crisis first. But I think me and young people are already grieving for this life we were told we could have. that isn't an option for us anymore. I feel like that's already grief.
You see, I have this constant dilemma in my head where it's like, do I try and stand up in defence of life on Earth and try and safeguard the future for everyone coming, or do I use what little time's left of this stable climate and stable economic system to live my life? And I kind of want to do both. Like, I kind of want to get to the point where it's like just past the point where it's like unachievable, but just before the point where the entire human civilization begins to break down like a Mad Max situation. I still want to do my travelling. I'm not gonna lie. Like, that's my travelling is one of the things that I've put on hold for the climate crisis. Like, I was planning to, before I got involved in Extinction Rebellion and then Insulate Britain, I was saving up, planning to go backpacking around Southeast Asia, and that whole dream is just on hold right now. Just well, not permanently, hopefully not permanently, but it's on hold. Have you got anything? What have you got on hold for the climate crisis?
My biggest dream was to have kids, and I never wanted biological ones. I wanted to adopt or foster.
You can still do that.
I worry with a criminal record and not stable finances. That might not even be an option.
Do you reckon the criminal record will stop you from adopting? Because that's something I'd like to do in the future as well, and I've got a criminal record as well now, so like, do you reckon that would really stop us from adopting?
I worry that it will. You know, I think we're looking at. I think one of the things I'm grieving is a sense of being able to have a plan. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Will that stop me being able to adopt? Like, at the point where I thought I might want to have kids, will we have enough of a society to have adoption? Like, we're looking at societal collapse.
Think about it this way, right? If society collapses, there will be a lot of orphans. Like, I'm pretty sure you could just walk down the street and pick up a couple of kids who were like starving to death. Like, hey kids, do you want a parent?
I have no doubt that there will be so many children in need of care and love and parenting, that we won't even be able to take them all in. All of us who wanted kids or wanted to adopt and who now can't. I'd rather those kids never had to suffer, even if I get to pick them up.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, kind of wish. So you've got Anthony Chips. Kind of wish that this wasn't the climate crisis wasn't a situation that we're in. You know, a part of me sometimes actually wishes I was born 30 years earlier. You know, maybe even 50 years earlier. Because you could drive around in your V8 cars and burn all your fossil fuels and fly all over the world, and you don't know about climate change. You don't have to feel guilty about anything, you know what I mean? You just kind of get on with it.
Funnily enough, though, I don't think there are that many dreams I've put on hold, really, for this. Like, I've dropped out of uni to do this full time, and I was doing a degree in a subject that I loved, but that wasn't going anywhere. I didn't have a vocation. So I don't feel like I've given much up. I actually feel like my life is richer and fuller and happier and more surrounded by love and joy and support than it has ever been in my entire life. And I think that's a real testament to the community that we're building here, because all of us are looking constantly at the scariest fucking thing you could ever be looking at. The reason so many people don't acknowledge just how serious the climate crisis is because it's a form of self-defense. It is so big and so scary what we are heading towards. We can't comprehend it. We can't feel that fear all the time. It's too much. We shut down. Like, soft denial is a form of human survival. And all of us are looking at this 24/7. And it's really hard, and it takes a lot out of you, and it's emotional work. And I never thought I'd have such a stressful life, aged 21. I never thought I'd go to prison. But despite all of that, I'm happier, genuinely, than I've ever been.
Second that.
Yeah, in my entire life. It's mad, and it's because I'm surrounded constantly by the most beautiful, brave, and brilliant people, and they've become my best friends and my family. And I constantly feel like I'm pushing myself. I've become a braver person. I've become a better person. Yeah.
Do you want to join us? Yeah, so what you were just saying then about the way it's changed your life being in these communities. It's all right. It really is mind-blowing because for the first time in my life, I've got a sense of real purpose. Like, I know I'm doing something actually meaningful with my life. Like, and more than that, like, you meet so many amazing people. Like, for the people who watch this podcast all the way through, I'm going to be like a broken record now, but like, you know, like the people in Insulate Britain, when I was in Insulate Britain, there was like 25 people in a house going out blocking the M25 3 days a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like on repeat for months. And I'm in these houses, these safe houses, and I had a realization one day, which was every single one of these people in this house is a fucking legend. Like, there is not even one single exception. Like, you've got 20 odd people in this house who are willing to go to prison, who are willing, you know, to get arrested, to get criminal records. The fucking bravery. Like, and the thing is, like, in Insulate Britain, there wasn't even a single fucking exception. Like, everyone who was there was hardcore as fuck. I was just like, I actually fell in love with them all. You know what I mean? It's so fucking awesome. Like, it's incredible.
I wish I'd been there for Insulate Britain. But I think we have that now too. It's great with the slow marching, seeing it opening up to a wider community. Because you're right, that is people who are willing to give their everything. When you sign up and say, I'll get arrested three times a week until I go to prison, that is hardcore. But that's not an option for everybody, you know, being able to just put everything in your life aside like that. And part of why I've been able to take the action I have is because of the privilege I enjoy. I'm white, I'm female presenting, and I'm middle class. Like, I feel a greater responsibility to take the action I have because so many do not have the privilege I've had to be able to take this action. And I think we are those of us who, particularly with the new powers coming in under the Public Order Bill, which are going to disproportionately affect already oppressed groups, makes me feel that moral duty even more keenly. And it's great with the slow marching that it has opened this community up to people who cannot put themselves in a position of arrest, either because we have a criminally unjust criminal justice system or for personal reasons. It's just not possible or safe for everybody. And now there is a way that these people can take action with Just Stop Oil and become a part of this beautiful community.
Without getting arrested or getting criminal records. Well, we say that, but then again, there was 9 people arrested today who didn't want to get arrested. That's just the police being knobs. Talking about privileges. I think it's important for us to recognise when we do have privileges. Over the last year, I've been recognising my own privileges. Like, I'm tall, I'm white, I'm a man, I'm straight. Like, I kind of got all the privileges. But it's about acknowledging that. Well, I wish I had some money, but it's about acknowledging, well, part of it is acknowledging your privileges and then using those privileges to do something meaningful. Like, I've been arrested 26 times at this point. I've done time in prison, you know, and I'd probably be, if I was black, or I probably would have been treated a lot worse than I would be being white. So I'm not going to stand there and say to a black person, like, you know, why are you not doing this? Why are you not getting arrested? Why are you not joining us? You know, because it's not the same. They don't get the same treatment that we do. And I think if you're watching this and, you know, you're a privileged person with a good background and family who'll take care of you, and you're looking at the climate crisis thinking, what can you do? Get in civil resistance. Come and join us. Now is the time to do that shit.
Even if you haven't got a family that will look out for you, like, none of my family, well, my mum has gone through a huge journey. My mum kicked me out after my first JSO action, and yesterday called me to say that she watched a recent debate I did and has signed up to Slow March. So one, I would say, don't give up on your family, even the people who see...
Your mum?
My mum has gone from last August kicking me out when I said I'd join Just Stop Oil to signing up to Slow March now. So the one thing would be, don't give up on those, like, family members who... or the people you think you're going to disappoint or who will hate you. Don't give up on them, and if your family will reject you. Look, mine did for a long time. You're coming into a family, like the love.
A big one.
Yeah, a big one. I probably shouldn't say better, but yeah, it's better.
It is pretty awesome.
Yeah, because I think.
Can I hold it?
Yeah, I think because you find yourself in a situation, once you educate yourself on the climate emergency properly, and you know the heartbreaking facts and the truth that we're all facing, you find yourself quickly being quite alienated and a black sheep from your family and loved ones, and that's happened to me, and I know it's happened to a lot of people in JSO, and that can be really hard, and you end up finding yourself full of like frustration, anger towards people that you love and you've known your entire life. But like the beautiful thing is, it's like, but when you come back from, you know, seeing your friends and your family, you come and see your JSO family, and there's your place, and you're no longer the black sheep, you're no longer alienated, you're no longer the crazy person in the room, you're many crazy people in the room. Or you feel crazy, but really everyone else around is actually crazy, because we are trying to save the world as we know it, and everyone else around us isn't. And if you write on paper, the people who aren't trying to save the world are crazy compared to the ones that are. But right now, the society we live in, the cultures we live in, we are deemed the crazy ones, which I'm completely fine with for now. But I would like a few more comrades, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, what you were saying about being, you know, once you really get into the climate movement and you have your eyes opened and you're surrounded by people who give a shit, who are willing to do something about it, it changes your whole life. Like you can be in a room with all of your friends from university or whoever you've known your entire life, and you can feel like you're completely alone. Like you're in the room and you've talked about them to the climate crisis. You've talked about your friends to the climate. You've talked to your friends about the climate crisis several times, and you just know they just don't care. I don't want to hear about it, and you just sat there. And it's like, for example, you'll see a news article that says 7 of the hottest days in 100,000 years have been in the last week, and you're just like, well, if I tell my friends or family, they won't care. And you can just thing is, I want to still be in civil resistance, but I feel like there's a point at which you push through, you can never come back. Like once you've like seen that side of it, you can't come back anymore. You can't unsee the truth, and it can leave you with a sense of feeling very alone. Especially if you're not constantly around JSO people. Like myself, I've got like JSO people in Manchester, but I spend the majority of my time around normal non-JSO friends and family. And I just feel like I can't express myself properly around them. I feel like you wanted to say something. You can see.
Yeah. I think it's like the climate crisis is uniquely unifying in a way that other movements for social change should have been, because it always affects everybody in society, but haven't been. You know, like civil rights. White people were able to sit on the sidelines and almost go, well, this will never affect me. It always affects society, wider society, but with the climate crisis, it's coming for us all. It doesn't matter if you're in the 1% right now. Like you can dodge your taxes. You can't dodge a wildfire coming to burn down your home. You can't dodge crop failure.
Well, you can have a second home.
You can't dodge crop failure, meaning you can't feed your children. Like the 1% may be protected for a bit longer, but even the people who are straight, cis, white, well-off men, it's coming for you too. And it changes the way you're thinking about all the messages society gives you, the climate crisis, because you know that there is this terrifying thing looming in the future, in the near future. Like in our lifetimes, all of us are going to see things get really bad if we don't take action now. All of us are going to see grief and suffering and death on a scale which is just unimaginable in our lifetimes. And that's why it's so hard to go back into these spaces where people aren't acknowledging that, because it changes your entire outlook on life.
It kind of fucks your head up as well, to be honest. Like being around people, it's like you start to question, like, am I crazy? Am I insane? Like,
I guess if I was just believing some guy who stood up in a talk and told me these things, then yeah, maybe. But you look at the science and you look at the people who are calling for the same thing we are, the United Nations, the International Energy Agency, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, all of the world's leading experts, all of these internationally respected scientific and political bodies are all saying the same things as us. And that's the moment where I really start to go, are we crazy? what's crazy? Where is all this madness in society when all of the experts are saying the same thing? And we're still following down this path of self-destruction. Money, corruption, greed, power tends to be what it comes back to.
I've been doing some thinking recently and some talking on the podcast about the system that we're in and how it's completely incapable of dealing with the situation. Like, we have like a short election cycles, politicians are bought out by massive corporations, etc., etc.
Did you see last week Rishi Sunak, or at the end of June, Rishi Sunak literally admitted and boasted that a fossil fuel funded think tank drafted the new public order bill, or some of the amendments for the new public order bill. And he stands there and he admits it. This corruption is so in our face, it's almost like we're so close to it we can't see it. It's bizarre.
I think it's more of like, it's just become the new normal. And I think like good old Boris set the standard so low for like politics in the UK. It's like people are just used to politicians lying and letting us down and not doing their jobs, and it's just become normal. And it's just like, I think one of the most frustrating thing about like civil disobedience is it comes down to people. Like, there's power in the people. Like, if everyone in this country united, the government couldn't do a damn thing. There's not many governments that could do anything. But it's about winning those people over and convincing them that, you know, this isn't the way and there's a better way, and, you know, building up that confidence and strength to take action, which isn't easy. And it is hard, but it's just like, it's so important for people to realise it's like, you are powerful. It's like, alone, like, your cries aren't heard and you're weak, but together, you know, your cries are heard and you're strong and you can achieve things. And it's just trying to get that across to people. And, you know, I don't want people to march with us every day, just give us a couple of days, you know, that's all we need. Show the government that the people are behind us.
Hand out some leaflets.
Yeah, exactly. And then we won't have to do actions, and we just lobby the government like the oil companies, but instead of with money, we're lobbying them with action. You know, that's the goal, that's what we want, and that's how we'll bring change. And it's like, it's interesting because I've had like newbies come to me and say, oh, isn't capitalism the problem? So if we deal with capitalism, we can sort out the climate emergency. I'm like, 100%, I'm anti-capitalist, I hate it, but we don't have time to completely rechange the system. We have to play with the cards that we've been given, save the world as we know it, and then break down the system that's been, you know, dominating our culture, our societies for so many years, and start afresh. But we don't have time to start afresh. We have to like stop oil and gas, stop the climate emergency, and then bring great change, or more great change. And it's like, I wish it could happen quicker, and I wish we did have time to take on capitalism, because I would love to do nothing else. But unfortunately we don't. So it's like, it's about prioritising, you know. It's like, I had a bee said to me today, it's like, oh, what happened if, you know, we got our demands and the world started, you know, doing a green transition and a just one, and, you know, the planet as we know was saved? I'd be like, yeah, that's great. I'd just move on to another cause. Like, that's it now. Like, what's next? Palestine actions? Or, you know, equal rights for trans or men and women? Like, there's so many other causes to fight for, and it's like, I've kind of made a decision to myself. It's like, that's it. I'm an activist for the rest of my life now. There'll always be something to fight for.
See, I disagree with you on that. Like, I'm purely in here for the climate crisis. Like all those other problems, that's a serious problem, but it's not the end of the world, you know? This is the end of the world. Like I feel like if Just Stop Oil had their demands met, there would be another climate movement. It's okay. Now we want massive infrastructure on wind turbines. Now we want insulating homes. Now we want all these other things. Like, I feel like there'd be several, like, even if we like got our demands met, like, we need to start the largest rewilding project of nature that there has ever been seen in the history of mankind. Like, we need to replant all the rainforests. We need to replant all the like kelp forests in the oceans. We need to every single street basically needs to be halved into a one-way street.
Bring back the marshes.
And bring back the marshes. We need to protect massive areas of fishing zones, like no fish zones, for like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of, you know, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but thousands and thousands and thousands of square kilometers of ocean, like no fish zone. Like, there's a list, as long as there are, of things that still go against like solving the climate emergency. I feel like if we actually solved the climate emergency and we actually sorted this shit out, I'd like, right, guys, I'm out. I'm going traveling the world. I'm going sailing the world. I'm going to live my life.
Well, it's like, I'm sure people have heard the saying, it's like, it's easier to picture the world and imagine the world ending than the end of capitalism. But it's like, when we win and we beat oil and gas, that's going to be an example of like, look what we've done. Like, we actually can bring great change, and we don't need those wankers in number 10 and Downing Street. It's like, we can do it ourselves, and this is how we do it. And then once we win, hopefully the next cause and the cause after that will be easier, because we've got the momentum, we've got the people, we've got the confidence, we've got reputation, so.
When we're heading towards a state where hundreds of lawyers have said we're going to see the breakdown of law and order at 1.5 degrees, tell me at that point that violence and hate crimes aren't going to get worse, and tell me that when society is collapsing and there isn't enough food on the shelves and people's homes are burning down in wildfires and floods, tell me that the oppression of the state isn't going to get worse. We are already seeing that the climate crisis is making the oppression of the state worse in terms of the new powers that they're bringing in and the way they affect different groups differently. So that's why I said all these other things that I care about have to be put on pause till we've tackled the climate crisis, because none of the other things I care about stand a chance unless we fight this.
So a good analogy I heard a while back is, if you imagine all the different movements and causes, like Black Lives Matter, trans rights, and all the different injustices in our world, there's quite a lot of them. Imagine they're all items on a table, right? And the climate, Earth's stable climate, is the table. Like, if you go around fixing all these other issues which need to be fixed, and I'm not denying it to be fixed, and don't fix the climate problem, when the table breaks and falls over, everything on the table falls off the table, hits the floor and smashes. Like, it's kind of like the issue that everything else relies on, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's not just people. I think people was what I got into it for, because I couldn't bear seeing all of this suffering and injustice in the world. But think of all the beautiful life that we share this home with, all of the animals and plants and the species that we are making extinct by the day. How dare we? How dare we do this to all other life on Earth?
So I was reading a wonderful book whilst I was in prison called Wilding. I'm not sure if you've read it. Have you read that?
I haven't read it, but somebody else I was in prison with was reading it in prison.
Okay, well, brilliant book. But it talks about the decline of nature over a few centuries, and because it takes place over a few centuries, it's not very noticeable over one lifetime. Like, every generation thinks nature is supposed to be like it was when they were a child. But if nature's going like this and you're born like when it's already halfway declined, you think that's normal, and then your grandchildren are born when it's like even more declined, and then they think that's normal. Like, even as human beings, we can't appreciate the full decline of nature. But this book really clarifies it. It says, like 200 years ago, 300 years ago, like, every single lamppost had swarms of flies around them, like thick with like the biodiversity was way higher than it is now. And I don't know where I'm really going with that, but it just kind of shows the decline in nature, and people aren't really noticing, to be honest.
I think it also comes down to, like, I've spent my entire adulthood life questioning the world that I live in and the wrongs that I've either seen or witnessed, same thing, or heard about. And when I talk about it to people, one of the most frustrating things I get in response is, that's life. And it's like, who said that's life? Like, if you look around us, like, everything, most things in our life right now is man-made. So if it's man-made, it can be undone by man. So it's not life. It's a life that's been created for us, but it isn't life, It's like, we can't compare ourselves to most of the animals because our lives are so abstract compared to theirs. And it's about changing your way of thinking and questioning the world around you, because it won't take you long to get fucking angry, because there's so much shit going on and there's so much wrong. And it's like I encourage people to question things and, you know, push the norm and take a step off the beaten track, because the beaten track is not just dreadfully boring, but it's just a kind of a way of conditioning you as well, you know. Like my family, my loved ones, they're conditioned, and to a point where they're just accepting all this and just going on their normal days, and that's not how it should be. It's like if you hear that your future and, you know, your immediate future, 1.5 could be here before 2030. And it's like when you hear that, it's like you're in danger, so you take action instead of standing there going, oh, that's life. It's like it's fight or flight, and there's nowhere to run away from the climate emergency, so you only have one option, is to fight, you know?
You know, I kind of want to ask you a question now. Like, so, you know, obviously you did the suit for an action, and I can imagine your life got pretty fucking crazy after that, right? Like, the amount of media attention you got. Like, I want to kind of ask, like, what was that like? Like, 1 minute you decide, yeah, I'll go do this. I know what it's like, 'cause I've done it myself. Like, oh yeah, I'll do anything it takes. I'll go to this culture action, and then the next thing you fucking know, like the whole fucking world knows who you are. You're just like, what the fuck? What was that like for you?
Fucking bizarre, mate. Like when we came out, we'd been in custody for just over 30 hours. We had no idea what had happened. My first, I guess, experience of it was the police, when they released Anna and I, said, "You've pissed a lot of people off. We think you might be in actual danger, and we know that you guys don't like us, but you need to call us if you think you are in danger." I was just like, whoa. I had no idea. I had no idea anything that had happened. And we came out, and my friend and Anna's partner was there to meet us. And they said, "You've got 50 million views." And I was like, "Oh, thank you for making me feel better after my 30 hours in custody, as if I've got 50 million views." And we're sat outside the courthouse, and people start coming up and asking Anna and I for selfies. And we were like, you weren't joking. And then a reporter came up, and we did our first interview, passing a bottle of whiskey back and forth between each other, because we'd just come out of custody, been handed a bottle of whiskey. We were like, we're still these, nobody knows who we are. It doesn't matter if we're drinking whiskey in an interview. And my life just, it's something I was completely unprepared for. And I don't want to sound ungrateful, because I've had these amazing opportunities come out of it. Things that are like, wow, this 21-year-old two-time dropout with pink hair is doing these things, like going and speaking on the news and being on the telly. And I did an Intelligence Squared debate the other day, which is bonkers, because I used to listen to those. So it's amazing. There's all these great opportunities that have come out of it. But equally, it's not what I ever wanted. I'm an action person, and I didn't quite realise that I was suddenly going to be a media person. I said that I never wanted to do any interviews. I said I'd rather go to prison than do spokes before that action. And now I've done both. I can confirm some days in prison were easier than just a 5-minute interview. But yeah, it's been mental and a complete shift in my life. I think I'd be just as dedicated anyway, but I'm definitely now intrinsically linked to Just Stop Oil. Some bits of it are really lovely, you know. I just want to clarify, your views on this podcast does not represent the views of Just Stop Oil. Just want to drop that in there. Yeah. Always good to have that disclaimer in. But there are some moments where it feels amazing, like being at the lunch today after the march, and I have people come up to me and say, "I signed up after I saw what you did," and that feels amazing. That feels like everything is worth it. But then in some ways, I feel like it doesn't matter what they find me in court. I've served my sentence with the media attention. Like, it doesn't get worse than that. They can throw me in prison as long as they like. I don't think it will get worse than the impact on my life that media attention has had.
I'm going to take a small break whilst I go and pee in that bush. And we're back. Sorry about that, I had to go. So, how did your family respond? You know, it's like 50 million fucking views. Like, did your mum fucking have a small heart attack when she saw that? Like, how did your family respond to, like you said, like, your family almost disowned you for saying you joined Just a Paul. How did they fucking react when they saw like you like with 50 million views like all over the internet?
Small heart attack is definitely an understatement. They weren't happy, but I think particularly from my dad and my brother both had reporters outside their houses. My dad for 2 days afterwards like camped outside his house, and he kicked me out when I was 18. So like I haven't lived there for years. I didn't have too much contact with him before then anyway. So for them it's had a huge impact on their life, which was completely unconsensual to them. And like my dad is a climate denier, so he can't even begin to understand why I'm doing this. And suddenly it had impacts on him in his home and in his work. And so they were really angry and upset. And now I can see why. I think immediately I was so hurt because I had members of my family telling me that I wasn't family anymore and that they would never speak to me again. Now I can see why they said those things, because it was this huge impact on their lives, which they had no idea was coming and which they never even began to agree to.
What's it like having a dad who doesn't believe in climate change?
The rare occasions that we do see each other, we attempt to make pleasant conversation and try and avoid this big elephant in the room that he doesn't believe in the climate crisis, and I have dedicated my whole life and my freedoms and my civil liberties to tackling the climate crisis.
That must be so infuriating for you.
Talk about cognitive dissonance, like it's mad.
That's got to be like really, like I can just imagine myself being in that position. That must be really infuriating. Like.
I think it was quite radicalising. Like he's like the poster child for the Conservatives. So I think it was quite radicalising having such hardline beliefs that I wasn't gonna get. Actually, I was indoctrinated by those for quite a while. I was brought up in this little Tory sphere, and the moment somebody showed me a way of thinking outside of it, I leapt at it.
How old was that?
17 when I met my ex, and then particularly when my dad kicked me out and I moved in with them and their mum, who's very environmentally aware and engaged a lot in civil resistance in the 80s, fighting for queer liberation. And like seeing the absurdity of my dad's beliefs plus her way of a different, more loving way of seeing the world, and her experience of actually taking direct action was like the perfect recipe for me being willing to take non-violent direct action.
So Phoebe, like before the age of 17, I can imagine would be a completely different person.
Very, very different. I had long brown hair. I looked very straight, very prim and proper. Wouldn't have broken any rules.
And now we've got a rebel on our hands.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting here about the family background. How does your mum feel about the whole climate thing? Does she acknowledge that it's a problem?
She does now, clearly, like signing up to Slow March. And I think when I went to prison, it opened up a lot more conversations with my family, because it wasn't just like, oh, you want to be like rebellious and cool, and like you want to be an Instagram star and get your 15 minutes of fame, and you're just being young and rebellious and stupid, to the point of me going to prison. And when I spoke, my dad wouldn't speak to me whilst I was in prison, but my mum would, and I always sounded really calm speaking to her. I never was crying, going, oh, I can't believe I've ended up in prison, I don't want to be here. I didn't want to be there, but I felt I had to be there, and I felt completely at peace being there. And I think she heard that, and that then meant we were able to have those calm conversations about why I needed to be there. And obviously it didn't sink in straight away. I've been out of prison for 8 months or something.
How long was you in prison?
Only a month, not quite as long as you, but it was on remand. You were on remand too, yeah, for the terrible crime of being sat in a car on the M25.
Well, they suspected you were trying to climb a gantry, right?
Can neither confirm nor deny.
No, you was never planning to do that. Anyway, next subject. I guess I'll tell you, like, when I first told Mum to join insulated breast and I'm going to get arrested and go to prison probably, she was like, "Oh my God, Josh, you need to think about your future." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm definitely doing that." And she's like, no, you don't get what I mean. You don't get what I mean. You need to get your priorities right. And I'm like, yeah, definitely got that right. And I think, like, with my mum, she was, I'm sorry if you're watching this, Mum, talking about you on a podcast, but it's going to happen eventually. She basically, like, it started off as like a fad. I remember her saying to me once, like, "Oh, once you're done with that thing, you're going to go on to another thing, and you're going to go to another thing, and it's never going to end." I was like, "No, the climate crisis doesn't have an end point, like, and it is like like I said, for me, it's different to you, but like the climate crisis was like the main reason I got into activism. Well, it's the only reason I got into activism. Let's be honest. But I feel like as time's gone on, and the more I've spoke to her about it, and the more I've kind of talked about it, like, she's actually beginning to understand. Like, I'll give you an example, right? So, I mentioned on the podcast before that I found out a few weeks ago I was going to be a dad. I'm not going to be a dad anymore. That's basically the pregnancy failed. Ectopic pregnancy. Anyway, long story short, but yeah. I was talking to my mum saying, like, I seriously am concerned about our future now. Like, you know, talking with the fact of a child being on the way, I was thinking, like, you know, seriously need to start thinking long term now, like, talking about this stuff with her. And I think she's actually started to get it now, you know, like, you know, when I'm talking about a baby on the way, like, we need to seriously fucking figure shit out now and get prepared. So I feel like she's starting to understand more now, but she just wishes she's come to understand, like, she understands why I'm doing it, but she just wishes it was somebody else doing it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think my mum was the soundest, to be honest. Before I took action, arrestable action, climbing a gantry N25, I can say that because I actually got caught on it, so it's okay. There's no denying that. I obviously spent 36 hours in a cell or something like that, and then we came home, and then the next day I was like, right, it's time to tell loved ones, because, you know, there's consequences to my actions and I need to know about it, and it's important. I had a bright idea to FaceTime my dad for some reason, and the second I FaceTimed my dad, he went straight into all the negatives. What about your job? What about your flat? What about your future? How are you going to have money? How are you going to be able to support yourself if you're in prison? And that was quite overwhelming, and I was already in quite an emotional place, and I was just like, fair enough, old man, if you're going to give it to me, I want to give it to you. So I went in hard, because in all honesty, like, the reason I'm here, the reason I'm with JSO is like my 3 pillars of sadness, I call it. It's like, I'm here to safeguard my niece's future. I want to stop millions of people suffering in the global south, and I want to preserve nature, the one thing that we truly belong to and we have a place in and we should be very grateful for. So I went hard in my dad, and I told him exactly why I was doing it, and got quite emotional because I was talking about my niece. And I remember looking up, wiping away the tears, and I looked at my phone screen and he was crying, and I was like, I've got you. Finally, I've cracked through, and I was like, look into it because it's serious. He's not bothered looking into it since, but it's the start of a conversation, which is great. I told my sister, and immediately she called me a twat, but only because she worries, and she completely understands why we're doing that. She doesn't like the fact that I might be going to prison, but she understands why I'm doing it, and we've made an agreement that she will take care of my niece's present and I'll focus on their future. And then the best one was my mum. When I told my mum, it was almost too casual. Like, I called her up and I told her that I'd just done an action and I'd been arrested and I could be looking at prison time. And she was like, Luke, it's fine, we know what you're like, it's okay. I need to go because I need to take you down to hospital for a cataract surgery. And that was it. Yeah. So I had like a mixed bag from my family and friends, all supportive but concerned, and similar to you, kind of wish someone else would do it. But not yet managed to inspire them to take action themselves, or they don't talk about it much, which kind of hurts, because like JSO is one of the biggest parts and most important parts of my life now, and they don't really talk about it. They don't really ask me questions about it, because I think out of sight, out of mind, which is their way of coping. But I think that's just us exercising our privilege, and it's like we have to have those hard conversations, we have to talk about it. It's fucking terrifying, but one of the reasons we're in this mess is because we've not talked about it enough, and people aren't terrified enough, you know. So conversation's important, and there's always going to be that one family member. It could be an uncle, it could be an aunt, it could be your nan. Sometimes nans can be very scary, like my nan's scary sometimes. But you know, it's important to do what you do, and you know, talk to them and explain them. And if they don't get it, they don't get it, and if they do, they do. But you know, if they're good family, they'll still love you for who you are, you know. And luckily, I've lost no loved ones since doing this. I have a few old friends who are police officers that we're probably not going to get on with that well anymore, but we don't really see each other anyway, so it's fine.
You know, a lot of the people we talk to, I've got family as well, like, that don't get it. Like, that's our main problem. Like, people not getting it. The majority of people don't get it. Like that woman today on the street, she didn't get it, you know. She doesn't understand the climate crisis. She doesn't think, like, it's a big problem. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from. If you've not read on any climate science, if you've not really understood, like, I used to think, like, oh yeah, climate change, it's going to get warmer. So it's going to be like Spain in the UK. That sounds fucking great. Like, I'm not going to complain about that. That sounds great. And I think a lot of people in the UK and the world are still thinking like that. They don't really understand the severity of the situation.
Yeah, I think people think that we're like a group of tree huggers that just want to like protect the forest, which, I mean, we do want to protect the forest, but you know, what we are talking about is the collapse of our life support systems, of our ability to feed ourselves. We're talking about the collapse of our economy and our pensions and our NHS. We're talking about the breakdown of law and order. We're talking about losing everything that we know and love. This isn't like wishy-washy stuff about protecting the environment. This is everything that we value, everything that we love is under threat by this, and that isn't communicated at all.
Okay. Yeah, go on.
Well, I was going to say, like, communication is like one of the biggest issues that we have, because it's like, you know, we've got to a point in society now where it's like, okay, climate change, climate emergency, it's acknowledged. Most people know it's a thing. Most people know it needs to change. But when it's put in the news, and like, you know, when they mention 1.5, people, that's a fucking number, 1.5. So people hear that and go, ooh, we need to get below 1.5, and then don't think beyond it. But it's like, after you said 1.5, then mention what happens at 1.5. After saying 2 degrees of warming, then mention what happens at 2 degrees warming. Because if you just say these numbers, they have no meaning, and they don't carry the weight. You don't get across the weight and the severity of the actual situation that we're in. And that's half the battle, and that's really frustrating. And it's like, going back to what you say, people's that kind of really irritating attitude. It's like, oh, it's okay, in a couple of years, you know, things are getting warmer, but we'll just be like Spain. Spain's nice. It's like, yeah, but if we're going to be like Spain, Spain's going to be like Africa. And if Spain's like Africa, there's more droughts.
Africa's going to be like fucking...
Yeah, there's more droughts, and 25% of our fucking fresh food products come from Spain. So where do you think that's not going to come to us anymore? You know, because we're enjoying Spain's climate, and now Spain is struggling with a new climate, which is too hot for them to produce tomatoes for us. So it's like, it's changing the conversation. It's how you word it, it's how you frame it is the most important thing. And I'm just fucking sick to death of just hearing 1.5. Tell me what 1.5 is, because then that'll get people on the street. That'll get people terrified, because 1.5 is absolutely horrendous for the global south, and it's still incredibly dangerous for global north. Because the second we get to 1.5, the chances of these trigger events happening will increase, because global temperatures are going up, and people aren't talking about these fucking trigger events. Because if a trigger event goes, it's not going to be like, oh, that's an extra 2.3 of warming over the next couple of decades. It'll happen fucking quick, you know. And I don't want it to get to that point, because if it does, yeah, it'll be a great opportunity to mobilise people, but it's beginning of the end, you know. I don't want to mobilise people in London with 4 feet of water. But if the Doomsday Glacier in the North Pole does go, because it's the size of California, and it is going at a scary rate, and it's now melting beneath it as well, which is terrifying. If that goes, then global sea levels are going up by 4 feet. And that's not going to happen over a couple of decades when we get ready for it. That's going to happen very quickly. And it's like, we need that sense of urgency. We need people to talk about it, and it's like, we need to be not the only ones pulling our hairs out, because we know how little time we have left, you know? And we get that by framing the conversation different and educating people more.
Onto that, You know, France has started, they include climate change with the weather forecast. So now they'll say, okay, it's going to be 30 degrees today, which is 4 degrees hotter than average, which should be this time of year, and that's because of climate change. And everything they do is because of climate change. Like, it's a really clever way of doing it. We should really push for that, to be honest.
100%.
But a part of me feels like I'd be able to say, I told you so, but I really don't want to be in that position.
No one does.
Exactly. We're talking about death and suffering on such a huge scale, and I feel like words like death have almost lost their meaning. You know, we talk about seeing billions of climate refugees, but as if they're just a number, when that's not. That's millions of families losing their homes and their safety. It's millions of children starving to death, millions of people without access to drinking water, and that creates worldwide ripples. There's going to be a scarcity of resources, and that will lead to war. There's going to be crop failure, and that leads to famine. The entire world as we know it, we're not going to see any of that. I think in that space, there's a certain level of climate breakdown is locked in at this point, and a certain level of grief and suffering. And I think we're in a position now where we're not just talking about stopping the climate crisis, but we're talking about if and when that level of downfall comes. I think what we're in control of now is what level of downfall, not if there is a downfall. We're locked in for climate breakdown. We still have this brief window where we can try and control how much we let the climate break down. But we're also in a window of trying to design a better society as we see that level of downfall. Like, hundreds of lawyers signed that letter to say we'll see the breakdown of law and order at 1.5 degrees of warming, and we are locked in for 1.5 degrees of warming. So I think we're now at this position of we know we're going to face the circumstances which will create a breakdown of law and order. How do we stop that happening so that we can still have a society, can have a better society than what we have now, because so much of the oppression is insidious. Like we're seeing the climate crisis here and the cost of living crisis, and people aren't connecting the dots because it's not presented to them as clearly as your energy bills could be 9 times cheaper with renewables, and they're not. It is a choice of this government that you are suffering this cost of living crisis, and it's part of the cost of oil crisis. I've gone completely off your question that you asked. What was it? What did you think we're going to see?
What would we see, yeah. As humanity, what would we see?
We're going to see downfall, and we're going to see grief and suffering and breakdown. But one of the things I've had faith in life more than anything else is that there actually is more good in the world than evil. And I think when we see all that grief and all that suffering, we're going to see more and more good people rising up too, and more people who are willing to prove the good in humanity.
Well said. And I want to just make clear to everybody, like, we talk about societal collapse and we talk about the downfall of humanity, but I want us all just to take a moment and think about what that actually means. Like, to realise what that means, we just think about what it is that really got value in this world. So I want you to think about, you know, a mother's love for her child. You know, they say it's a moment, like when a mother first holds her baby for the first time, when a father first holds his newborn baby for the first time, like the love between like grandparents and their grandchildren, the moment when a young teenage couple fall in love for the first time, you know, young love, you know, like there's all these moments throughout a human life that are fucking so incredible. And I look at it as, we say we're trying to save human civilization. Okay, that sounds very out there, but a human lifetime is about important moments. you know, having your first child, having your first love, seeing your children go to school, like having it's about moments in a life, and we're not just talking about one life, we're talking about billions of lives. So you imagine those moments billions of times over. That is what we're trying to save. And it doesn't get, like, I feel like you can actually relate to that, because if you're a mother, you've had children, you know what that feels like. If everybody's had a first love, you know. Imagine that moment over billions of people for infinity. That is what we're trying to save. And for most people on the outside, it doesn't really sink in. Like, I think for climate activists, it actually has started to sink in, and that's why we've got such a mental health crisis amongst climate activists, because it's quite a big thing to deal with. But we really need to come to terms with the fact that what have we got to lose? And it's a fucking lot. Yeah. You know? Like, part of the reason I got into civil resistance is, like, I imagined myself 10 years, 20 years from now, like, looking at young families who are just having babies and they're starving, and like, I bet I want to be able to look them straight in their eyes and say, I absolutely tried my hardest to stop this. Like, I fucking gave it my all. I've made massive sacrifices in my life. I went to prison. You get that? I went to prison, and, you know, I gave up a lot in my life. Like, and I still don't think that'd be enough. And we've still got the audio, it's okay. And I still don't think that'd be enough. Like, I don't want to stand there and say, like, we failed. I'm sorry that we failed you. Yeah. There you go.
I don't think I can add to that.
Yeah, it's
Mic drop moment.
Pretty savage. Just gonna pause for 1 second whilst I sort this out. And we're back. Sorry about that little interruption. The wind blew over our camera. So one thing that I realised whilst I was in prison is that you can have the same idea conveyed in several different ways. Like, an idea is conveyed in a combination of words, right? And there is an infinite combination of words to convey the same idea. And the way that I just conveyed that same idea, I can tell from both of your faces, impacted you both in an emotional way, all right? And it's the same idea you've both come across before, but it's about, in my opinion, finding the right words to convey that idea. Like, how did you feel when I explained it in the terms of human moments that are worth saving? Like, how did that make you both feel?
I'll go first. It's a hard question. It made me think about my loved ones. I'm not a very wealthy person. Traditionally, I don't have a lot of money, but I do feel like a wealthy person. If someone said, point me to your wealth, I'd point to the people in my life. That's where I get my wealth from. And I think about them and it brings a smile to my face. A good example is my niece. So when I'm on uncle duties and I'm spending time with her, it's the happiest I can be, you know. I'm full of joy, but unfortunately, after a while, the facts that I know and the cold truth kind of creeps in, and unfortunately, that kind of happiness gets replaced with sadness and despair, and it's hard because I shouldn't feel uncomfortable being around loved ones, but sometimes I am, because I just can't help but picture their future, and it breaks my fucking heart. And it's something that I have to learn to manage and deal with, and it's something I'm still learning to manage. I don't know if there's something I could do to make things better, just kind of continue with Just Stop Oil. That's my therapy, and that's what kind of gets me through it, and kind of is something I can direct all this negative emotion, desperation, anger and frustration towards, which really helps me kind of come away and be able to spend time with my niece and not have that weight on my shoulders, because I've managed to, you know, offload it towards, you know, the cause. If it's a march or if it's a day volunteering or doing a talk, you know, that helps. But it is hard. It is hard to kind of be around loved ones and fit into normal life and just carry on like things are normal?
Yeah, I think it's the difference between intellectual connection and emotional connection, because intellectually, you know, hardcore climate deniers aren't platformed as much, and most people do agree that there is a climate crisis, and most people can intellectually acknowledge that people are suffering around the world, but it hasn't hit them emotionally. Like if what happened in Pakistan last year, where 33 million people were displaced in the UK, you know, that's 3 times the population of London, over 3 times the population of London. If that happened here, we'd be fucking rioting. We wouldn't be nicely slow marching down the street. We'd be in uproar, because you have no choice but to emotionally connect when it is your family that has lost their homes. It's your wedding photos that were destroyed in that flood. It is your child that you now cannot feed. You can't help but emotionally connect. But when you put it in terms that people can connect with those moments in their own life and how they'd feel if they were lost, that's what motivates people into action. You know, most people are not bad people, aren't not out on the streets with us because they want millions of people to suffer and die. I think they're there because they don't realise the impact that their inaction has on letting that happen. And when you see it right in front of you, you realise, if I'm not taking action against this, then I'm letting it happen. But because we have the fucking privilege and the luxury of not seeing it before our eyes here, people think that their inaction isn't contributing to that, when it is.
The truth is, you know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, if you was aware of the climate crisis and you decided not to do anything about it, you're not going to like yourself very much. You know, you look back at all these people who took action to try and prevent it, and even if we fail, right, and even if we don't get anywhere, like, you could say to yourself, well, it was all worthless anyway. But those people who took action, like myself and you, like, you'll genuinely be able to look children in their eyes and say, well, you wouldn't swear, but you'd say, I tried to stop this from happening, and I gave it everything that I had. Like, if you're somebody who has seen, like, you was aware of the climate crisis, what are you going to say? You're going to look at them and say, well, I knew this was coming, I just didn't try. Well, you're not going to like yourself very much, and now is the moment to act. And even if we have passed the point of no return with the climate, there are still billions of lives that could be saved. If billions of people need to be relocated because of the climate crisis in 20 years' time, let's start moving them now. Let's get them moving ahead of time. Let's start building the hospitals and the schools and the rainwater harvesting and the solar power collection. And, you know, we could still save billions of lives even if we have passed the point of no return, you know? Like, there's a lot of things that could be done. So it's never too late to act. It's never too late to take action. You know, wherever you're watching this, find your local civil resistance group and sign up. Like, you don't have to be arrested. You could just give leaflets out on the street. You could book talks, and you could work behind a computer screen, just literally, like, logging people's hours and shit, or whatever it is you do. You know, I'm not very good at paying computer screens, but, you know, there's a lot of things I imagine that you could do that we need help with. You could do what I did today and just film a protest. You know, there's a million different roles for you, and, you know, your children and your children's children are relying on us making this change now. And if we don't make this change now, the future generations, they will spit on our graves for failing them. You know, we had the abundance of life on Earth, sustainable weather systems, you know, agriculture, civilizations where you could, you know, do stupid shit like be an influencer and go and do, do some stupid ass shit with your life. It doesn't matter because there's always food in the supermarket. You had all of that and you threw it away. So I think your children and your grandchildren will not forgive you unless you take action now. Is there anything you want to say to that, either of you?
I'll give it a go. I imagine a lot of people watching this podcast is already signed up, but if they're not, I would strongly, I'm begging you to join us at Just Stop Oil. Like, I've been where you've been. I've been as hopeless and as terrified and as lone as you are. But once I came to JSO, I found a community of people that don't just understand how I feel or feel exactly the same way I do, but I've got to a point when I'm taking action about it and actually trying to bring good change. And it's a beautiful thing. Like, I struggled to get across how grateful I am for Just Stop Oil and the people that I found. I have hope again. I lost hope for ages. That was gone, and now it's back, and I'm grateful for that. And I've met people that I'll know for the rest of my life, regardless of what happens. So yeah, join Just Stop Oil, pick a side, join us on the roads, and if you can't do that, there's plenty of other options for you. Just reach out, and there's a place for you, for everyone.
I think a lot of people see the fear and the rage that we act upon, and those things are true and they're real. And I think all of us have that inside of us. But what people don't see is the joy in resistance. Like, in the community, yeah. But the feeling I get from taking action is amazing. It's like the sense of peace washes over me. And I think that peace comes from the knowing that I'm not complicit in this murderous regime, and knowing that I have done everything non-violently in my power. And only when I feel like I've done that, there's the Mario Savio quote about putting your body onto the gears of the machine. Fuck that, I want to throw myself at it. I want to throw myself at the fucking machine. And it's only when I've done that I get that sense of peace. And I think that's why I felt largely quite peaceful in prison, because even though I looked around, I was like, this is weird, this is not where I thought I'd be age 21, this isn't where I'm furious, it's where I felt I needed to be age 21. But I was still at peace with it. Every morning that I woke up there, I was at peace with waking up there.
Mm-hmm. Right, so we've done for about an hour now, so we're going to round up. If there's anything you want to say at the end of we've had some pretty good rounding up speeches, but if there's anything you want to say, get it in now. You covered everything, yeah? We've had a pretty good roundup. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, then please consider subscribing. Do you think people should subscribe to my podcast?
I think they should subscribe to your podcast and sign up at juststopoil.org.
Definitely. All right, cool. We'll see you next time.
We are the tongue that speaks the truth. We are the song upon the wind. We are the courage to stand forth. We are the change that now begins. On this good green earth, we will take a stand with an open heart and a healing hand. With an open heart and a healing hand.